Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to go over grips and aiming styles, and I know last video I mentioned this one would be about aim training translation, but due to suggestion I've put this one ahead instead. So to start off, I'm going to introduce these topics, then I will go into some scientific breakdowns of how we aim, before I can then come back again to break down the pros and cons of each muscle group and the various grips widely adopted today. For aiming styles, we'll see today that some software products try to break this down and to categorize your movements into wrist aiming, arm aiming, or mixed. This covers most of the ground already, and I know our fingers is used too in aiming, but it isn't really necessary for this breakdown, as finger aiming is more of a component, where arm or wrist movements serve the bulk of how you're navigating. I'll be going over finger movement too though, because it's important to understand why an artist would use their arm for clean strokes, and why it's often used as a recovery activity for stability suffering patients, and also why surgeons use their fingers for fine motor control, and you have calligraphy writers too, so there are muscles or components more suited to a job than you realise. So let's break this down scientifically, and then we can evaluate exactly which aiming style is best. Here in the images you may have noticed that there are dots on each part of the body, and these represent pivot points. These are usually places that you anchor to your desk to improve your stability, as it allows you to rest that area against your desk. For me personally, the anchor is just below my elbow, so I don't actually have my elbow on desk, and I use a mixed aiming style. If you don't rest your elbow like this in any way, then it's most likely that you are arm aiming, but without having that anchor rest spot, you'll find that moving round your arm weighing 2 to 5 kilograms is quite tiring. You'll also find you get a lot of tension in your shoulders. It's probably best to start off with arm aiming now that I've mentioned shoulders, so let's start off with what we already know. The shoulder is quite a large muscle in your arm, and primarily it excels at moving laterally as well as forwards and backwards. As you can see in the image, which is called flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction. Our focus here is mainly towards these movements. With arm aiming, regardless of any anchor points, the movement itself keeps the arm relatively stiff, and when you flex the abduction movement specifically, it usually results in a very stable motion. The reason why it's so stable is because there is little motor noise, as you are isolating the shoulder muscle alone, and also this part of the shoulder is comprised of low twitch muscle fibers. This type of fiber is focused on sustained, smaller movements and postural control, and so our body is built to support this type of movement really well. Where this falls down, however, is the movement is very lumbersome. You're often moving your whole arm around, so you have reduced mobility. Moving back to what I'm using for the arm aiming image, I'm quickly going to cover internal and external rotation, which is basically forearm aiming. It's still operated by the rotator cuffs on the shoulder though. Again, this has fantastic stability, but now at the cost of potential forearm friction, and you are also restricted in how far you can rotate, so often this aiming style is best suited for mid-range type motions. It is still too heavy and slow for small movements, and again the forearm does not deal in precision, but it is a stability junction for your hand to operate around your wrist cuffs. So in summary, even though the arm is great for stability and clean lines, it can be very temperamental with precision, and there's a couple reasons for this. The mouse is very far away from the muscle that's operating it. It's similar to holding a very long stick and trying to turn off a light switch with the other end. You'll find the shots you do hit are extremely clean, but more often than not you'll tire from this way of aiming very quickly, and you'll start landing on each side of the target zone, like you would keep hitting around the light switch with this really long stick. This precision is affected primarily because the larger shoulder muscle requires a stronger signal from the body to be activated, so it doesn't deal very well with small adjustment-based movements. That's where your hands and fingers come in, but the trade-off is that these muscles that operate these are more prone to twitchy behavior. For this last part, I've put on screen an example for the range of motion provided by arm aiming, and its literal function is stability. Now this is where people try to combat or emphasize their aiming style with sensitivity, and by the end of this series you will understand how everything interlinks. What I mean by this is, like in the example I've put down, that the shoulder is fantastic for long stable motions, so say that could be tracking. Someone will instead use a high sensitivity but wrist track. This is what I'm trying to establish. Yes, you can get good, but as long as you understand that that isn't the best part of the body for the motion that you're required to do. Before I move on to wrist and hand aiming, I need to cover multiple fiber summation so you can understand the picture I'm trying to show you. And this is when a weak signal is sent by the central nervous system to contract a muscle. The smaller motor units are more excitable than the larger ones and are stimulated first. As the strength of the signal increases, the more and larger motor units become excited too. When aiming with the shoulder, a strong signal is required for the shoulder to move, but when aiming with your hand, a weaker signal could excite numerous smaller motor units. As a result, we tend to exhibit more twitchy behavior. We can demonstrate this already by holding your arm out ahead. You'll notice that we can never maintain it perfectly still, but we are very good at fine motor control anyway as humans. And the even better thing is that you can get better at this skill with practice and improved endurance. The improvement comes from the smooth transition of muscle fibers between resting and flexing, and the process for when you lift your hand up is that only some muscle fibers in your arm will support your brain's demand. When these tire out, other muscle fibers will drop in to replace them while the others relax. You'll notice that as your arm gets progressively more tired, it starts to shake more and more. There seems to be a tendency for CNS activators to make the shaking worse. Think coffee, while CNS depressors make your hands more steady. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because when we use our finer motor controls, like in the fingers and hand, it's important to understand that it can be trained, and these are the reasons why they are less stable in the first place. The layman speculation theory is that bulk lifting of weights will build strong muscles, but it is not as useful when fine motor control is needed. For precision work, for developing those muscles, other types of exercises are needed. Some people claim this for smoother exercises, such as Tai Chi, instead. Okay, now moving on to wrist aiming. And the function of the wrist joint is to provide range of motion necessary to adequately perform daily functions, while maintaining a physiological level of inherent stability. Basically, it provides a foundation for our hands to operate. On screen again we can see the adduction and abduction movements, which features in aiming. However, even though the body supports this movement, be very careful, because when used to aim, then excessive use of your wrists will lead to general degradation, and the wrists aren't a strong unit in your body anyway. If you're also throwing your mouse at your wrist in an attempt to flick to areas, if you're on a mid or low sensitivity, then you will also place unnecessary strain on your wrist, and it's not uncommon to pick up an injury by doing this. Its range of motion is limited in the sense that it definitely provides less range than arm aiming, but it is more precise as the wrist is situated very close to the mouse and allows for finer handling. Also, this aiming style is much quicker than arm. It's only a snap of the wrist after all, which is a much lighter movement, and the hand or wrist will serve a bulk of the fast, precise movements, and then that's where finger aiming comes into play for additional fine-tuning. I may as well cover the finger aiming component here, and it's quite obvious by now that the fingers are the precision tools of the body. We use them every day to grasp, write, paint, or pretty much do anything. It goes without saying that for aiming, we use our fingers a lot in most of our adjustments, even just a bit. It's worth mentioning though before we get onto grips, that some people emphasize more finger movement than others, specifically myself in how I aim. Just be very careful that you're also not inviting more micro adjustments by making this a natural part of your aiming style. It took me a very long time to overcome this barrier, because ideally what you want is your arm to be more precise, wrist or hand aim to become more precise, before needing to use the fingers to fine tune further. This is because of a few points, and mostly if you use too much finger movement, then your grip is fundamentally changing constantly, or your mouse will end up in odd positions so that you can't continue to aim effectively. I should have mentioned this in the wrist topic too. When you angle your mouse to make a shot, your mouse is now in a position where it's facing what? 38.1 degrees, for example. Now say you're required to hit something else that spawns above you. The angle you need to move your mouse will be harder to pull off. So ideally, your mouse should be facing forwards or at a constant angle you've trained up. The mouse shouldn't change angles when you aim. For mixed aiming, now that I've broken down the advantages of each body part, you can see the picture of what I was trying to paint, and it's literally that the human design is that your arm provides stable long-range movements, and the lower down you work, it goes more into the precision mechanics, and that's the brunt of it. When you incorporate mixed aim, you identify a target, and then you'll move a little bit of your arm, a little bit of your wrist or hand, and potentially some finger movements too, as I know I did all three. The major benefit of this is speed. You get explosive power of the shoulder, whilst also moving your aim closer with your wrist too. But there is a caveat. When you move all these components in your arm, how much do you need to move each one? How do you identify which one has moved too much? There is so much motor noise that a combination of these can just see weird results. However, I personally feel this is still the best way to aim, and then to perfect the transition of each aiming component as and when they are required. Of course, this is sensitivity dictated though. What I mean by this is that ideally for making long-range movements, you should absolutely be using your arm. It's best suited to that physically, but on a higher sense you are never required to do this, so your limits will now be towards perfecting the smaller wrist precision or hand or finger movements. Going back to the sensitivity video, it wasn't biased towards a higher sense, but it was merely suggesting the benefits of it, and we get exactly the same principle here. You shouldn't really be favouring the shoulder-arm movement so much, but more towards making these precision tools as smooth and stable as the arm is, and this is pretty much surgeon theory. Learn unfathomable control with your fingers, then it's just about learning to have the control to support that, like I mentioned in the sensitivity video. Okay, for grips, there's no easy way to say there is definitely a best one, but there are better ones than others, and the reason that it's hard to determine which is best is because we have different mice and hand sizes, so just bluntly saying use this might not be the best advice to give. The thing you want to look for, mainly, which I found to be absolutely paramount in peak aiming ability, is that your mouse should be facing forward most of the time as possible, or more specifically, we often see some grips lock the mouse into a definite position, and this helps us to work out what movements we need to do with our mouse. If you see a target in the top left, it's simple, you just move your mouse top left, and almost all of the time the mouse is right in your grip, ready to continue aiming, but that's more on the aiming style side. Moving on to palm grip, this grip is incredibly stable and uses mostly arm and wrist aiming. There is almost no finger movement involved because the whole hand is gripping the mouse. So if you have fantastic precision using just these, then you're going to be extremely consistent and very deadly. Where this grip suffers, however, is because of the increased stability, you can often find stiffness, and if the arm aiming plays a large part in your palm grip, then it's by far one of the slowest aim combinations. Nonetheless, people usually couple this grip with a mid to low sense. Again, as we've noted from aiming styles, you can already picture an AWP sniper just flicking their arm over to you cleanly. This is just now the basis of where grip started to fundamentally change. We already had the stability, but there were issues with limited speed definitely, but also precision. And this goes beyond just flicking or aiming speed, but also click speed as required by some games. More specifically, people wanted a grip that put less emphasis on arm aiming. Simply just using a claw grip transferred ownership of the mouse control from your shoulder to your hand because of the added finger flexibility. And this position allowed for faster shooting, faster flicking, as the position is now more dexterous, and you're not resting your whole arm downwards. However, there was less consistency with the precision generally speaking. The stability of this grip is affected by unintended or inaccurate movements from individual fingers, either by aiming or clicking, which affects the overall control. But this again is something that can be trained to considerable levels. It is also worth noting that this position for your finger also allows for faster clicking. Next is the fingertip grip. This grip is basically the same as palm except that your palm doesn't touch the mouse at all. More emphasis is put into using the fingers to control adjustments, and we face the exact same issues as claw. However, this time, much less stability, but at the cost of increased dexterity. The space freed up from the palm contact and mouse allows your mouse movement without it being completely joined onto the end of your arm as one unit. Because it moves in such a way, it allows for 360-degree movement more easily. You can see similar movement in how I move my mouse, where there is no limitation in any direction. People on palm grip, however, will suffer when flicking downwards, which is the direction where the arm is, and thus creates a general weakness for using that grip. Next is the fingertip grip, and this is the grip I use. It's mostly just a combination of the points from the fingertip grip and the claw grip, as you can expect, so it's very unstable but optimized for dexterity and speed. With this grip specifically, because the hand is also hunched and only the fingertips are touching, any small movements with your fingers can throw your aim off, even with just a click, and honestly, I don't know why I do it. I just feel very free on this and able to use my fingers more to develop the control and land my aim where I need it to. Now there are so many variations out there for grips, so I can't cover them all, but they are usually just an adaptation of the one shown before, though further to optimize their click speed, or at most it will likely be for stability. There are many other good grips out there, but we must answer so which one is best. Well, like shoulder or arm aiming, I consider the equivalent grip to be palm, and because it suffers so bad dexterity wise, I think you can gain benefits from a grip that uses more precision-based motor units like claw or fingertip, because you can utilize the added speed and dexterity and build stability on top of that. Alternatively, you can continue to keep painting precisely with your whole arm, and there's little benefit to training precision that way, even though as mentioned, it can be deadly when people get really good at this. It's just so handicapped in terms of improvement. I think you'll find you get stuck very quick in games in the sense that your aim doesn't actually improve after a certain cut-off point, and that for me was years ago until I picked up aim training. Okay guys, now for the summary. I hope you understand how each part of the arm works and interacts in terms of aiming, and how the different grips correlate with this, but also how sensitivity can be thrown in the mix too to change things up. I will leave you with a couple points on screen, but mainly the thing you should take away from this video is that you can get fantastic at aiming on any body part, it does not matter. If you suffer with instability or slowness and you have these particular habits, then now you know why and you can adapt to change that. The main thing to also take away from this video though is that in your grips, make sure your mouse does not angle and that it's stable in its position or you will not get very far. Other than that, you can take any of the things mentioned in this video and go very far. So, thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.